What's going on, casters? Dylan from Pandito Gaming here, back again with another video. And today we're going to be looking at some market movement that's happened over the past few months and discuss whether or not I think they're real, whether they'll maintain, and what I'm doing about them. Specifically, we're going to be looking at different full art cards from different sets to see how they've been performing recently in the last few months. Now, before we get into it, remember, none of this is financial advice. I'm simply sharing with you data that I've found, things that I've discovered, and my feelings and thoughts on what I'm planning on doing about it. So, without any further ado, let's jump into it. Like I said, we're looking at full art cards. So specifically, to start with, we're going to be looking at some of the Kickstarter Divine cards uh, and how they've been changing recently. So for those of you who are newer to Elestrals or weren't around when it first came out, I want to preface this with most of these cards were somewhere around the $80 to $100 mark when Elestrals Kickstarter first came out. Really, up until probably about a year ago, these cards were selling consistently in the $60 to $100 range, especially the Zeus and Demeter cards. Those have historically performed better from Kickstarter than others. There's actually a different variant of the Zeus card, which isn't really mentioned here. There's a print error on some of those, so it has a slightly different coloring on it. I won't get into that, but that is something that has interested people in the past because there's a different variant of that card. But getting into these, you can see over the past year or so, people kind of came in here and started posting cards to try to get rid of them. So Demeter, you can see, has had a couple of sales in the 45, even $40 ranges here, and have been the only listings that have been on TCG Player. Like I said, this card was selling pretty consistently between $80 and $100 for a while. The same thing has happened with Zeus. If you look at this card, again, not very many listings, not very many sales, but people came in and have just been posting lower value costs for these. How TCG Player manages its market price for lower volume cards is confusing sometimes. Even though there's only been one sale at $50, and 6 months before that there was one for 75, but the market price is 50. I don't know. They kind of just figure out what they want to figure out, right? I think the most interesting of these is probably the Hephaestus card here, where it has a current listed market price of 25. If you look over the last half a year or so, a lot of sales in here around that $20 to $30 mark. If you picked up this card at $20 to $30, I think you got an absolute steal for it. Now, if we look over at eBay, you can see more information in here. You can see that only one Zeus is posted on eBay right now at $70. And if you look at the historical sales for these, there haven't been any instances in the last year. So searching for that doesn't actually pull anything up. Searching for Demeter gives you roughly the same thing. You can see one of these sold at the very end of last year for about $90. Like I said, these cards were selling very consistently around that $80 to $100 mark. I think this is an opportunity where if you can find some of these divine cards at $50 or less, especially that Hephaestus, if you can get that around $20 or $30, I legitimately do think these cards should be selling around the $80 to $100 mark. There are not a lot of these in existence. If you look at the Kickstarter set, you can see there is a fair number of full art cards in this set. I don't remember the exact number. I think there's 14 to 16, somewhere around there, with only 10,000 boxes created for the Kickstarter. That means there's less than 1,000 copies of each of these cards. Now, whether that's 500 or 800, like there's definitely a supply of these out there, but especially for collectors, mint condition cards of these are going to be fairly rare because when Kickstarter came out, it was the only set. If people wanted to play with a full art card in their deck, they would have used the Kickstarter edition. Now, obviously, first edition came out later, and people could get cheaper versions of these. And I think that's part of the reason why these have the downturn that they have is just because there's been more of these dumped from the first edition side, and people have been willing to buy those over the Kickstarter. But I think especially if we get people coming in for Awakened or something or some other injection of interest in Elestrals, people will want to pick up these Kickstarter cards because they do look really good. The card quality is very solid, and these are probably some of the best versions of the Divines that the card game has created. I think the art's really good for most of these. So I'm keeping an eye on these. The other things that I would point out come from Shattered Stars. So first, looking at the full art stadium cards. So you can see here Atlantis, for the most part, has sold out on TCG Player. Like the listings went from consistently selling around $2 to $3 for the back half of last year to now this year. This card is consistently selling from $8 to $10. And this is something that I've pointed out before to a lot of different people. When people do mass openings of Shattered Stars, they just go and dump all of the copies of the cards they don't want on TCG Player or eBay, and they consistently sell out over a period of time, and then they jump up in price. This isn't only something that you can see from the Atlantis card. This shows up in other examples as well. So Mountains of Boreas, the exact same thing happened. People were selling this at $3 or $4 very consistently for a while. Now that card has sold out, and you're seeing sales from $6 to $7 to $8 to the point now where we only have 2 listings for this card. I think this will continue to happen. And yes, this is more frequent for more playable stadiums, obviously, but the arts on these cards are really good. I think if you take a look over at Foloi Forest, that's an example of one that has not gone off yet. You can see it actually held its value a little bit longer than a lot of the other ones, but I think with the injection of people helping hunt for the Antitan, you saw a lot of these coming onto the market in the last 2 or 3 months. But those supplies are starting to run out, right? You can see there's a total of 17 of these left, right around $2, and then it jumps immediately up to the $6 mark. I personally have made a play on some of the full art stadiums already when I was buying full art spirits. I also had some people reach out and ask about the stadiums, and I bought up I don't know, somewhere around like 20-ish copies of each stadium, around the $1 to $2 mark. People are willing to sell them for that price, but people are willing to pay $5 to $8 pretty consistently for these, even right now with the market where it is. I think these are definitely, I see these as a strong pickup and a good investment long term. I think in general, I've mentioned this before, but Shattered Stars across the board, any full art in that set selling for $1 to $2 is an opportunity. Another good example of this is the Heliolith from Gemini. This is a part of Shattered Stars that most people have kind of ignored. It was one of the most kept in stock sets from Shattered Stars 2. It still is. But this card recently has been selling at the $5 mark. You can see that some people have come in and undercut the value of that, but there have been multiple sales already on eBay and TCG Player from the $5 to $8 range, and historically this card was selling closer to $1 or $2 before they started drying up a little bit more. But this card keeps bouncing back up to that $5 mark, no matter what is happening to how many people are dropping it. You can see here, I think Aviolith is another really good example of this, where this card has completely sold out now. But you can see here, you could have bought it for 50 cents last August, and be reselling it now for 10x what you originally paid for it. And even then, just as recent as what is that, 6 months ago, you could have been buying it for 75 cents to $1. And again, there have been multiple confirmed sales over $4, pushing $5 on here and on eBay. People just want these cards. They look great. They're very good to look at, to collect. A lot of people do want to play with them in their deck. And I think while you can pick them up at $1, people look at it and they're like, oh, that's just a $1 card. But when there's only 40 copies on the market at $1, once those dry up, people are still willing to pay $3, $4, $5 for this card. And that's one of the reasons why I open as many Shattered Stars as I do and why I put money into it. There's a good example here of Arcolith, which is starting to dry up as well. You can see the same pattern, and when it comes out, it drops all the way down. Usually these hit like a $1 or $2 mark. People who are players laugh at these cards because they're like, hey, it's a $1 card. I only need 2 or 3 copies. People who are collectors kind of scoff at it sometimes and say, well, this is just a 50-cent card or whatever. And I think a lot of times these people just don't realize when you've been in this environment, in the Elestrals environment for too long, you start undervaluing cards because that's what everybody else is always doing. But eventually, when that supply dries out, people still value the card and will still want to buy it. And, a $1 card can turn into a 6, 7, $10 card pretty easily just in the matter of a couple months. Now, the last conversation that I want to have here is a little bit more interesting, and that's the idea of the Frostfall full arts. Specifically, Kion and Lakagon more than anything, but I think the Imperawat and potentially Improsix and Shiverwar are interesting conversations as well. Going in here, you can see for a very long time, these cards have been pushed down, driven to absolute zero value, right? Mainly because of the Cryostorch starter decks. You could literally average 1 full art per Cryoscorch deck. And many people, myself included, bought hundreds of these starter decks. And we're just opening them nonstop because the rate of reverse stellars, full arts was just, it was dumb to pass it up, right? Like you could buy those starter decks for $15 on the market very easily, and every single pack that you opened pretty much had a hit. I'd say it was like 50% hit rate, maybe even more. I had some starter decks that had 2 full arts and a reverse stellar in it. It was just completely broken. But because of that, those few sellers had 10, 20, 30 copies of each of these full arts. Now, something important to note is that because the print run got messed up like it did, a full art is not guaranteed in the box of Frostfall like it is in pretty much every other first edition set. I'd say from my experience, I've opened somewhere around 20, 25 Frostfall boxes. I would roughly guesstimate that you have like a 60% hit rate for full arts. So I would say at this point, even though Frostfall had a massive printing, and I do think there's still tons of these full arts that have not been opened yet, that probably at least half of the full arts have already been discovered, potentially more. So do I think these cards ever should have been $5? Like, should this Lakagon card ever have dropped all the way down to $5? Absolutely not. Is it worth $15 today? I think that's a roughly good estimate for this card. It could potentially sell for more, but I do think there are still a lot of these out there. Do I think Kion should be selling at $20? Probably not. I think that is a little high, especially with as many people as are opening Frostfall. Some of these other cards, like Shiverwar selling at $250, is just such a crazy concept to me. I can't believe people are willing to sell this card for $2.50. This card was legitimately selling for $30 and $40 just a year and a half ago. Now, obviously, the influx of people opening boxes, people are just racing to the bottom for this, right? Like, you see that the big drop off here of consistent $2 sales happened relatively recently. But, you know, when one seller has 27 of these in stock, people aren't going to want to get near their price because they don't want to get undercut and take forever to sell. I do think at some point in the future, this card probably will be $30 again, because eventually the supply is going to dry up. There's probably only maybe low thousands of these cards left. Something to keep in mind is, there's over 10,000 boxes, I believe, left for Frostfall. So even with a 1 in 15 hit rate and a 1 in 15 option of pulling a specific full art and a let's be generous, a 50% hit rate for a full art in a box, you're still talking somewhere on the order of 1,000 more copies of these full arts. So I don't think they'll ever be as valuable as something from Kickstarter. I think they should and will settle in the $10 to $40 range, depending on how good of a card they are. I think Keone as a divine, as a popular element and a playable card, I think this will probably settle closer to the $20 to $30 mark. Lockagon's an amazingly popular Elestral. I think it probably settles in the $20 to $30 range. But some of these other ones selling at 2 or 250, like that feels criminal to me. I think these will end up settling in the $5 to $10 range, even once some of the market gets flushed out for these. So I do see some of these as an opportunity. I do think that it's kind of an aberration that they have jumped up as much as they have. I think it's more just people haven't noticed that the price has gone up and aren't selling the things that have recently been opened. I could be wrong about that though. But these are kind of the things that I noticed around the full art market, the things that I've seen that's been happening, things that are kind of driving some of my decisions when it comes to investing and buying product from people. What have you noticed? What are things that you've seen that you don't think other people are paying attention to? What's your opinion on these plays? Leave a comment and let me know. Let me know if you like this kind of content. Make sure you leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more like this. That's all I got for you today. I'm out.